Right now, if you want to cross an ocean, you book a seat. You hand your bag to someone else. You sit in a pressurized tube moving at 900 kilometers an hour, eat a meal someone prepared for you, watch something on a screen, and land on the other side. The entire experience is designed to make the fact that you are suspended over 5 kilometers of open water feel like nothing at all. For most of human history, crossing open water was not nothing. It was the most terrifying thing a person could choose to do. Not because people were less brave, but because the ocean, before maps, before instruments, before any reliable way of knowing where you were or whether land existed in the direction you were heading, was genuinely unknowable. It had no bottom you could see, no edge you could point to, no landmark that stayed fixed. It moved. It changed color and texture and mood without warning. And if you went far enough in the wrong direction, it simply went on forever. The question is not how ancient humans learned to navigate it. The question is what kind of person looks at the open horizon, knowing all of that, and paddles toward it anyway. The fear of deep water is not a modern invention. Psychologists who study thalassophobia, the persistent, intense dread of open ocean, have traced its roots to something genuinely evolutionary. Humans are land mammals who rely heavily on vision to detect threats and source food. Deep water removes both of those advantages simultaneously. You cannot see the bottom. You cannot see what is moving beneath you. You are suspended above a darkness that has no floor you can reach, in an environment your body was never designed to survive without artificial help. A 2016 study by researcher Nicholas Carlton established that fear of the unknown is one of the most deeply wired survival mechanisms in the human species. The open ocean is its purest possible expression. To paddle into it deliberately in a vessel made of wood and lashed fibers was to walk directly into the thing the human nervous system most fundamentally recoils from. And yet they did it, repeatedly, across tens of thousands of years. The oldest confirmed evidence of humans crossing open ocean comes from the stretch of water between what is now Indonesia and Australia, roughly 65,000 years ago. Archaeologist Helen Farr of the University of Southampton has studied the evidence extensively. Her conclusion is unambiguous. These were not accidental drift events. The crossing required navigating at least 60 miles of open water with no visible destination on the other side. Someone built a vessel capable of that distance, loaded it with enough people to establish a viable population on the other side, and left. There was no way to know Australia existed before they went. No satellite image, no explorer's report, no returning expedition with news of land. There was only the sea and a direction and a decision to keep moving. Think about what that decision actually required. Not just courage in the abstract, but the specific willingness to watch the land you came from disappear behind you, knowing you could not turn back once the current took you, knowing that the people on shore watching you go might be the last familiar faces you ever saw. The island you left was everything. Food sources you knew, water sources you knew, predators you understood, people who recognized your face. The water ahead was nothing, in every practical sense of the word. You were not exploring. You were erasing the world you understood and replacing it with open horizon. And yet they went. The crossing to Australia was not an isolated act of recklessness. It was the beginning of a pattern that would repeat for tens of thousands of years across the widest ocean on Earth. The Pacific covers more surface area than all of the planet's landmasses combined. Island by island, from Southeast Asia outward, humans moved into it, not in a single migration, but in a series of deliberate outward pushes that placed people on islands separated by hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles of open water. By around 3,000 years ago, Polynesian navigators were making intentional return voyages across distances that European sailors, with compasses and charts and years of accumulated cartographic knowledge, would not attempt for another 2,000 years. Before any of those voyages departed, something happened on shore that rarely gets mentioned in accounts of ancient seafaring. There were rituals, offerings made to sea deities. In Polynesian tradition, the ocean god Tahangaroha and the deep water god Kanaloha, prayers spoken over the vessel, and what oral traditions describe as storytelling sessions in which navigational knowledge and ancestral voyaging stories were recounted aloud to the crew before departure. These were not mere ceremonies. They were a specific psychological technology for managing the terror of what was about to happen. The stories did two things at once. They encoded navigational information in a form the brain could hold under stress, and they connected the people about to leave with every ancestor who had made a crossing and survived it. You were not going alone into the dark. You were going in the company of everyone who had gone before you and come back. The ritual was the proof that return was possible. The navigator Tupaia, who sailed with Captain James Cook in 1769, drew a map from memory that recorded the relative positions of 130 islands across an expanse of the Pacific the size of the continental United States. He had never written any of it down. It existed entirely inside his head, absorbed through years of training, memorized through song and story and deliberate practice, held together by a cognitive framework that treated the ocean not as empty space, but as a structured landscape full of information. The star compass, used by Micronesian navigators, divided the horizon into 32 points based on where specific stars rose and set. A trained navigator did not think of the ocean as featureless. He read it, the direction of swells that had traveled thousands of miles from distant weather systems, the temperature changes in the water under the hull, the flight paths of birds that only roosted on land, the color of the water above shallow reefs still invisible beyond the horizon. But understanding the technique is not the same as understanding the person who used it. Because even with all of that knowledge, the ocean still did what oceans do. Consider what night on open water actually meant before artificial light. No torch that could survive a storm, no illumination beyond stars and whatever moon the sky offered. The hull of the canoe separating you from water that in the Pacific regularly reaches depths of over 4 kilometers. Every sound amplified. The creak of lashed timber, the slap of water on the hull, the wind shifting direction in the dark. No land visible in any direction. No way to know how far you had come or how far remained. Just the stars overhead and the feel of swells moving under the boat, and the navigator at the stern who had memorized a world that no one else could see. A typhoon could build overnight. A navigation error of a single degree, sustained over hundreds of miles, could place you weeks from any island. And the ocean at that scale did not negotiate. It simply continued in every direction until it met another shore, or it didn't. The last of the great traditional navigators was a Micronesian man named Mau Piailug from the tiny coral atoll of Tahiti in the Caroline Islands. He had begun sailing with his grandfather at the age of 4 and was initiated as a master navigator at 18. He had never been lost. He had been shipwrecked on an uninhabited island for 7 months following a typhoon and had survived it. When the Polynesian Voyaging Society came to him in 1976 and asked him to navigate the double-hulled canoe Hokuleha from Hawaii to Tahiti, a voyage of 2,500 miles across open ocean, he agreed, even though he had never sailed those waters before and had never navigated more than 600 miles in a single passage. He stayed awake for most of the 34-day crossing, not because the stars and swells required it at every moment, but because he had an image of Tahiti fixed in his mind, and he trusted it. Asked once why he was not afraid of the sea, he said something worth pausing on. He said, "If you ever lose sight of the island in your mind, you will be lost." He was not talking about navigation. He was talking about something older and harder to name, the internal certainty that the destination exists even when you cannot see it, cannot measure it, cannot prove it is there. Every ancient ocean crossing in human history depended on that certainty. Not the absence of fear, not the possession of superior information, just the willingness to hold an invisible destination in your mind and keep moving toward it when the horizon gave you nothing back. The people who crossed to Australia 65,000 years ago did not know what was on the other side. They could not have known. Mau Piailug himself once said of his ancestors, "If they had courage, it was because they had faith in the knowledge passed down to them." Not certainty, faith. And there is a specific kind of bravery in that distinction, the bravery of moving towards something you cannot verify, carried by nothing more than the accumulated trust that the people who came before you were right and that the ocean, for all its indifference, was crossable. One man named Tupaia held 130 islands in his head without a single piece of paper. One man named Mau Piailug navigated 2,500 miles of open water using the feel of swells against a hull. And 65,000 years before either of them, someone whose name we will never know looked at 60 miles of open water with no visible end, built something that could float, and went. The ocean did not become less terrifying between then and now. The people who crossed it simply decided that whatever was on the other side was worth the fear of finding out.